One day, my mother-in-law asked me to help make dumplings, which is a cherished tradition in our family. Not only is it a delightful activity, but it also helps us save money. Without hesitation, I agreed and headed to her house. Walking into the kitchen, I saw her bustling around preparing everything she needed. After washing my hands, I joined her at the table, ready to begin our culinary adventure. She skillfully rolled balls of dough, and I carefully filled them with the delicious filling. My mother-in-law has always been a fun and funny person. I noticed that she cared for me, which was evident in her jokes that revolved around the same topic, adult relationships. I felt a little awkward at first, but over time, I got used to her playful nature. Now let me tell you a little about my mother-in-law. She cannot be called an old woman. She has bright eyes and an attractive figure. Of course, she is a bit fuller than I prefer, but I never thought of anything more than family relations. My wife is more than enough for me, although I admit that I am sometimes tempted if the opportunity arises. My mother-in-law, however, is of no consequence in that regard. And yet, as we stood side by side in her spacious kitchen, something intriguing happened. Doubts began to creep into my mind as I found myself mesmerized by her presence. I began to notice various details of her beautiful body that suddenly excited me. Her hands in particular caught my attention. They were quick and strong, maneuvering swiftly across the test. I couldn't help but wonder how she would have used those hands in a different context. Surprisingly, it was as if my mother-in-law had read my mind. She moved closer, and I felt her warmth and strength. The angrier my thoughts became, the tighter she pressed herself against me. She swiveled her hips, stood in front of me, or bent over to get ingredients, all of which further distracted me from my work. We turned on some music to liven things up. She started dancing, moving to the beat with her graceful feet. Later, she changed her seat at the table and stood directly across from me. She had to bend over slightly to stand properly. I caught a glimpse of her cleavage through her robe and was intrigued by what I saw. I wrapped up the rest of the meat and looked at the cleavage again. My mother-in-law has a keen eye. She doesn't miss a thing. She smiled mischievously, moved over to me and mimed something. Oddly enough, it didn't look like a dumpling. She turned and put it in my hand. Looking closer, I noticed it was a unique figurine, hinting at a possible connection between us. I chuckled, realizing the resemblance. She undid the button on her robe, causing me to pause. What would happen next? Nothing. She continued molding her dumplings and cast a sly glance at me. I blushed slightly, but strangely enough, it intrigued me. I thought, why pursue an older woman when there are plenty of young girls willing to do anything? And then I thought, why not? She's not old at all. She has a great sense of humor and strong hands, and what she had under her robe I really liked. My mother-in-law, wasting no time, reacted to my muddled thoughts and undid another button. At this point, I was humming some kind of tune. She stooped even lower, looking at me with her sly eyes. Despite her laughter, I paid no attention to it. It dawned on me that I needed to act, and act immediately. Only a fool would not understand my mother-in-law's subtle hints. I wiped my hands clean of the flour, rinsed them with water, and quickly pinned her against the wall. It was exactly what she had been waiting for. Her face was flushed, she was breathing hard, and her robe was fraying at the seams. Dumplings sprinkled from the table. Our connection was so strong that the table shook and chairs tipped over. When no one else was around, there was no need to hold back. We cleaned up the kitchen, fixed our hair, had a cup of tea each, and continued molding dough. She was no longer joking, but working quickly and confidently. My back ached and I longed for a break, a moment of respite. I noticed that she was out of breath too. We decided to sit outside on the balcony. I went out on the balcony and sat down in a chair, and she joined me. She had already thrown off her robe and was kneeling beside me in just her shirt. Even though I wanted to rest, I couldn't resist the opportunity. I explored every inch of my mother-in-law's body, leaving no part untouched. She was pleased as she had not experienced such sensations for a long time. Her husband is useless and spends half the year in the country house. A beautiful woman like my mother-in-law should not be neglected. Immersed in thought, I kept my mother-in-law on my lap for an hour. She didn't want to go back to making dumplings. We found something more interesting to do. As they say, we combined the pleasant with the useful. Eventually, we returned to the kitchen table. Both of us were disheveled, flushed, and sweaty. Who could think about work at a time like this? All I could focus on was having a good time. Besides, it was scorching hot outside. She suggested we change clothes, saying it was too hot and she lacked energy, as if we were in a sauna. I nodded in agreement, and she quickly took off her shirt. I quickly stripped off my clothes as well. Her smile indicated her satisfaction. It was clear that she wanted more. Retirement didn't seem to calm her down like it would with a young girl. On the contrary, her lust grew stronger with each passing moment. Unable to resist any longer, I hugged her tightly and led her to the balcony. Fortunately, a cool breeze was blowing, and it was not so hot outside. The chair on the balcony was wide and comfortable, with sturdy legs. Personally, I always feel a note of sadness when a woman is single and cannot afford such a luxury. It reflects on her character and appearance. We had a wonderful time together. Despite my wife's call, I decided not to pick up the phone. To avoid awkward situations, my mother-in-law quickly rushed to the front door and locked it. I couldn't help but think what a clever girl she was. We sat on the balcony until the first dusk. We had worked so hard that we could barely stay on our feet. I felt a little unsteady from the exertion. I thought, let my mother-in-law enjoy this happiness, for she has never experienced such a long-lasting joy. I also had to mold dumplings. Our relatives might have asked why we did so little and what we were doing. How could we answer that? We decided to meet the next day and continue molding dumplings. As for today, we would say that we accidentally oversalted the minced meat and need to go to the store again. It was the right decision. The next morning I arrived at my mother-in-law's house early. To my surprise, a large number of dumplings were already spread on the table. She had bought ready-made dumplings from the market so that she could focus on more important matters. She was giggling. I was delighted as well. We immediately headed to the balcony. However, we closed the blinds on the window so that no one from the street would notice our antics. We also pulled the curtains. We put on some soft music. We freshened up. We tuned up and set out on our adventure. My mother-in-law was a smart woman. She did everything right. There was nothing to fault. That's the joy of dealing with a smart person. It's delightful. Until we had store-bought dumplings in the freezer, we kept working. There was no rush in this endeavor. No one interfered or helped us. So my mother-in-law and I cooked in the kitchen, not only dumplings, but also other dishes while no one was home.